Hi there, you may have seen my video called A Whole Lot of Fuss About Nothing, which is about the controversial last bar for timpani of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, a bar that is far more famous than it should be, and all because of a misprint. This is a copy of the timpani part used in the first performance. The original parts are not publicly available, but what I have been able to do is to try to recreate this one as closely as possible, and you can now download that new version for free from my website www.adrianbending.com. We don't know how many times the original parts were used, but shortly after the first performance, a first edition and a new set of parts was produced, and at some point these parts were put away and lost for a very long time, perhaps as much as 180 years. However, there are a few vital things in these parts that somehow didn't make it into that first edition, and so these were only discovered around 35 years ago. On the 22nd of December 1808 there was a very famous 4-hour-long concert in Vienna entirely of Beethoven's music, and it seems that he was determined to pack as many new pieces as possible into this rare showcase. That evening the orchestra was also required to premiere the Sixth Symphony, the Fourth Piano Concerto and the Choral Fantasy, plus play some smaller works. And so the Fifth Symphony was neither the longest nor possibly the most challenging new piece in the programme. This concert took place in a freezing cold theatre at a busy time of year, and there was a tricky clash with another important concert in Vienna. And so the orchestra was a smaller than usual scratch band, including some amateur players, all of them playing for the first time a remarkable amount of extremely unfamiliar music. Beethoven was known as a performer, premiering most of his major piano works. But this concert represented a turning point for him. Due to his increasing deafness, it was the last time he performed in public. It's already easy to see the scale of what Beethoven had taken on, not only in putting on this concert, but also being the composer and soloist. But there's more. Beethoven was also the conductor. There had been some problems at a concert a month earlier, and for this concert the players didn't want to rehearse with him. Short of rehearsal time anyway, it's interesting to wonder how it all went, particularly with this new music and Beethoven, despite not rehearsing with the players, being the only person who really knew the music well enough to inject any sense of a group performance. Even the very best produced timpani parts don't make much sense out of context, and today, even if we are familiar with the music, it seems impossible for us to prepare without listening to recordings and looking at the score. But these two things were completely unavailable to the player in that concert. Sound recording was still 100 years away, and only one score would have been prepared alongside Beethoven's own difficult-to-read manuscript. Never mind these issues for timpanists. Given all the circumstances of this uniquely ambitious concert, we might assume that the orchestral parts would have been prepared in order to be quite helpful. Let's take a look and try to get an idea of what the players of the day had to deal with. The part is certainly neat and doesn't seem to have been produced in a hurry. Everything is clear and easy to read, and potential problems such as awkward page turns are well anticipated and avoided. However, none of the bar's rests are separated into groups. Groupings that fit with the music, often multiples of 8 bars for example, are vastly preferable if you need to count. And you'll notice that there are very few indications of tempo, minimal dynamics, no cues, and there are absolutely no bar numbers or rehearsal letters. This suggests that if things did go wrong in rehearsals, then most likely all they could do would be to go back to the beginning of a movement and play through again. There are a couple of occasions where the copyist predicts that he'll run out of space, and so he crams in as much as necessary, including splitting a couple of bars across 2 lines. And there are very few errors, literally just a crossing out or two. It is thought that this part was only used at the most on a few occasions, and there is only one marking from a player, where they need to keep track of repeated bars in the very important solo between the 3rd and 4th movements. The part being very unhelpful in the run-up to this solo tells us one of a few things. Either the player was very sure indeed of where he had to play, or Beethoven was impeccable at bringing everyone in, or there was a large element of risk with the potential for players to get lost and miss important entries. We do know that one piece in this concert had to be restarted because a repeat was missed. At the time, this was probably the longest and most important timpani solo ever written, but given it was the premiere, it hadn't had time to become notorious, and so maybe the player of the day just played it calmly without all the expectation that we find we have today with passages like this. In terms of producing a version of this part that could be distributed, I had to consider things carefully. Obviously, I wanted to recreate the original as closely as possible, but generating any further controversy and debate isn't desirable because this part doesn't provide justification to play things that are now confirmed to be errors. And so I have reproduced the part as closely as possible, but noted when there are mistakes or revisions. Finding this part helped resolve very quickly a few controversial issues, particularly on the last page, including that infamous roll in the very last bar. Rather than playing a concert today using this part, perhaps its greater value lies in giving us some fascinating insights into how players of the day had to approach performing these works just as they were being completed. Today, we have utterly different levels of knowledge and experience, but we still demand orchestral parts with a lot more information, such as cues and bar numbers, rather than just the bare minimum as we have here. As you open this part, maybe try to imagine being the timpanist seeing it for the first time and then playing it in that first performance. And then, what might be much harder to consider is the thought that all that debate and controversy since, about a couple of tiny errors, only caused because this part was lost, might so easily have been completely avoided. What an utterly extraordinary experience it must have been to be a player or audience member at that remarkable concert, one which Esa-Pekka Salonen describes as the single event that most affected the history of music.